Dancing with Ease, Body Brain Balance, and another episode of The Healing Path. I started this series of conversations with friends and colleagues um, who are working in all kinds of different areas of healing. And the purpose is to share various different ideas and different ways that we can explore healing in our own lives. And the other thing, everything starts inside with self-healing, and it expands outward from there. So what's healing for one person might not be healing for another. And so the conversations cover a whole wide spectrum of various different episodes. And my new friend, Zen Benefiel, will be coming on, but I think I can't see his image right at the moment because I'm supposed to be able to click the button and bring him on. So let us see if he is on there. There he is. And I'll bring him on now, and he can share a little bit about his history, and then we'll talk about stubbing our toes and learning to walk.
That's from my book, Stubbing My Toe on Purpose. Right. Thank you very much for bringing me on, Laura, and it's a pleasure to talk with you. From the brief introduction, I take it that you want me to talk just a little bit about what got me here. First of all, a tryst got me here. And I was orphaned as a newborn as a result. Adopted earlier, found out I was adopted when my sister was brought home, also adopted. I was 4.5 at the time. And it sent me inside. Even so young, I talk about it to some people. They're like, how did you? I don't know. I just did. Right. I went inside and I started asking questions. And some of those were, okay, do I have a father and mother in heaven? And can I talk to them?
Ah.
And interestingly enough, a few months later, a voice came one evening and simply announced itself as, hey, you. And I was like, what? It was so loud and so deep, male voice, didn't frighten me, but it was loud enough that it, rather than engage it, I actually spun around and asked my mother, who was sitting 20, 25 feet away, if she heard it too. And I knew it was loud enough that she should have. And she says, no, I didn't hear any voice. Must have been a peeping Tom. And, and I realized that, okay, I'm not going to deny what I heard because I never heard it, even though she didn't. So there's something else going on here. Over the years, I developed a conversation with this voice, trusted it implicitly. And anytime I had questions, I could go to that inner truth looking place, so to speak, which is what old friend Kaidi called it. That's actually what his Taoist sanctuary was here in Tempe. It was called the Inner Truth Looking Place. Dao Fudaguan, I think, is. At any way, as a teenager, I was in college and on a pre-med program, and I came back from first quarter, was distraught with my direction in life and felt empty, alone, knew not where I was going, even though medicine was a good direction. And so I hit my knees and I knelt in prayer and I asked, I said, Father, I want to know what truth is, and I'm willing to die for it if necessary. And I'll be darned, the next week during a meditation, I was asked by name if I was willing to die for what I believed in. Now, what do when you get a question like that? I was 18 and I thought, at first it was kind of imposing. I didn't know. My first thought was Christ consciousness. When I thought it didn't feel quite full, so I dismissed it and went on. And I thought about cosmic consciousness, and that felt full for some reason. So I said yes. And then I was listening to an album in my meditation. There was a guitar riff. Sounds like a rocket ship taking off. It happened simultaneously as I said yes. And I get a tug from my solar plexus. And I popped out of body and turned to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed, turned back to look where I was going. And before I could get turned around, I was engulfed by white light. And it had a feeling of home. And it also carried a high pitched, iridescent, effervescent sensation with it. And then I realized, oh, I'm thinking. I can think. I'm not dead. Right. And so Impetuous Teenager came out then and just flippantly thought, wow, is there more? Because I was just in light. There was nothing but me, my mind thinking in this light. And when I asked the question if there was more, I felt a slight movement, and I'm in an indigo background with points of light surrounding me. And I intuitively knew these points of light were points of consciousness at that point, and pun intended. And then the voice picked back up and says, these are those that you're to work with in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime. Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Have faith and trust that everything you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow. And then I felt another rush of energy, and I'm back in my body taking a gulp of air. Now, what a rite of passage for an 18-year-old. You know, I can look back on it now and say, wow, when I went through it, man, life got nuts right after that because I didn't know what to do. And talking about it just created distance between me and others because they were listening with jaded ears, thinking I was saying, I'm the one. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You don't get it. The words facilitate, right? Which means working with others. And a key feature, you know, that most of those who experience the messianic complex forget. And so that launched my life. And, you know, 47 years later, I arrive at executive director position for Live and Let Live Global Peace Movement. So imagine that.
It's often a long and winding journey, right?
Oh my gosh. I don't know that it ever short. Sometimes it can feel truncated because of choices you make that are better than maybe you might have. And it moves things along quicker because you've made a better choice. But yeah, and yes, it does take time.
I think I was thinking about how I was when I was 18. And I sometimes think that at that age, we are really open, but we don't have a lot of groundedness in experience to be able to handle um, ideas and concepts and the
Put it
kind
in
of,
context.
yeah, and the energy that comes with it. Because because it got all this energy, and and you're young, and you already have a lot of energy when you're young, and then you have the added energy. And for me, it was just so easy to go too fast,
Oh, we
you know,
always do, right? That's what
and
they say about millennium or millennials. Now, I heard uh, one a friend of mine that does organizational development and generational work, right, within the organizations. And one of the things about millennials is, yeah, you just let them run. They'll beat their head against the wall enough times till it gets bloody, and then they'll turn and ask questions.
oh my, oh my, oh
But
my.
didn't we do that too?
Okay. Well, actually, one of the things is that you will keep doing what you're doing until it no longer works.
Mm-hmm.
And and for me, I could feel the wall probably 30 or 40 feet before anybody else felt the wall. And so I'm going, look out. And everybody else is looking at me like, "What?"
The
And
reason I'm laughing is in junior high, we had a co-ed gym day. And so the game that we were playing consisted of blindfolding ourselves, walking from one end of the gym to the other, picking up a volleyball and walking back. So
Okay.
I put the blindfold on. I'm ready. I'm in, like, the runner's stance, getting ready to take off. And I think I'm going to go the right direction. And so I'm trotting along, and all of a sudden, bam, and I'm on
Uh-oh.
my butt. And
Uh-oh.
I don't know what I hit, right? When I pull the blindfold up, I look where I need to be going, pull it back down, and then I start trotting again. I'm not walking still. I'm trotting, and I have my arms out in front of me this time so I don't run into anything. And then the stage hits me across the chest because my arms are too high. And so then I finally get down on the ground. I'm looking around for a volleyball, and I hear our teacher, who's the football coach, he's just guffawing, and I can't figure
Oh
out
no.
why. Then all of a sudden, I feel something drip on the back of my hand, and I'm like, "Oh man, I can't be sweating that much." And I pull my blindfold off, and I'm in a pool of my own blood. I
Uh-oh.
I I, I cut my forehead. I actually hit the corner of a cement wall, split my head open, didn't know it, and continued
To
doing what
run
I
on
was doing
volleyball.
until I pulled the blindfold off and said, "Oh, gosh." And I look up at Puck and I said, "Puck, I think I'm hurt." And he's still doubled over laughing because I'm not hurt. I don't know anything.
Right.
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 So,
That's kind of a metaphor for life, isn't it?
absolutely. My
So
life is full of those kinds of experiences. And that's probably one of the most demonstrable. And, you think about it, it's not so funny. But even as I'm the one that it happened to, it's kind of funny. I had no
but
lasting injury from it.
also in hindsight, there's so much that we can see looking backwards that we couldn't see looking forwards. Sometimes you can't even see it when it's right in front of your face happening to you at the moment.
Isn't that usually the
So
case if you're not really that self-aware or observant, or reflective of your outer world? It's like, the comparison of what's going on inside and what's happening outside. We don't ever make that. I don't say we never. We often don't make that connection until later in life. And we actually live half inside and half outside. So, yeah, doesn't that just make sense? Well, it takes a little life experience to do so, or maybe a lot of life experience. One of the questions I'd been asked in a different interview was, what's the best advice you can give as a life coach for people who want to become life coaches? And my first response is, have a life first.
sorry, I'm laughing. But yes, I mean, yes, totally.
Right, you see these 20 somethings that get certified as a life coach, and then they go out and think they know what they're doing. And maybe they do to some degree, especially those that are maybe more empathic and that can sense how to engage, or what questions are pregnant to ask. Um, Without that, though, I don't understand how you could possibly think that you could you could have value. It's kind of misdirected at that point, in my opinion.
Well, and then I also remember I spent a lot of time with older people because that was how I managed the energy I had and the speed with which I was thinking and the experiences is that older people my own age, they were like, "What is she doing?" Older
Yeah,
people,
me too. I hung out with people 10 years older, at least.
yeah,
Still do.
and and they and they knew more, and so they could share more with you. And I got a lot of information and knowledge. It was useful for me. Now, funny little side thing happened is I posted our uh, advance notice about our meeting, and a friend of mine wrote in that she had actually stubbed her toe, and she was looking forward to this, and she was worried that it might be broken. So I wanted to ask you the TOE, which is
Yes.
toe, and I know it's a play on words for something else.
Well, stubbing my toe it is a double entendre in itself. First of all, being willing to stub my toe on purpose in order to find things out, and to stub my toe theory of everything on purpose, which is about my perfected form, fit, and function in the world. And we all have one, in my estimation. And the subtitle, though, is really the identifier. It's a seminal view of consciousness, cosmology, and the congruence of science and spirituality. And it's all a personal perspective filled with references, and yet having observation of my subjective experiences, reporting on them, asking questions, postulating, possibilities and things like that. And Jeff Michelab made a comment of that he thought it was pretty rare for someone to be able to have such ability to report objectively on their subjective experiences. So I had a lot of history of questioning my own truth and poking holes in it to make sure it was real.
I think it's a very, very good skill to develop because everything that happens to us feels personal. It and it and we
Isn't
don't
it?
understand. We
I
don't
mean, it is. It
understand.
is. It is, and it isn't. That's the paradox.
Right. And without a body, you you can't interface with the world.
Mm-hmm.
But to also recognize that probably 90, what do you think, 97, 98% of everything that comes at you from the world, you can't really change. You have to change yourself, in response to it.
We see the world differently because our eyes change, and in that perspective, we also have to come to the question of, okay, what was my part in creating this? And often, if we're willing to be honest and look in the mirror deeply, it's been our habitual, perhaps even unconscious thinking that have produced the outer events for us to reflect on and adjust.
And I would guess that that's part of your learning to walk
Yes.
is making those adjustments, the reflection, so that you can change some of the habitual
Mm-hmm.
things that, in my experience, a lot of things that we do habitually bring pain to ourselves and the people we really care about. Not
Mm-hmm.
intentionally, but because, I don't know.
No, we're not self-aware enough to realize that that's what's happening. And the changes that we make, the world operates on subtle energies, right? And you and I both have experienced that. In that subtleness, it's like micro adjustments that we make that really make the big difference. The little things that we do, and then repeat those little things that bring that ultimate experience of fulfillment, happiness, joy, partnership, even. Uh, and we often find ourselves in challenging relationships because we haven't prepared ourselves well enough to actually enter a relationship that is healthy, right? We still have those micro adjustments to make that we haven't yet that keep us, like you were saying, our habits and our behaviors become painful to us because, first of all, we have unspoken, unfulfilled expectations. That's probably the primary thing. We
I
don't
think
talk
you're right.
about what we really want, right? We tend to want to please others, thinking that that's going to bring pleasure to ourselves. And then over time, we begin to feel a little empty because it's not authentic anymore.
Right, right. And it's like the idea, if I achieve this degree, I'll be happy. If
Mm-hmm.
I get this award, I'll be happy. I
It's
you,
not to
you
say
name
you
it.
won't be happy for a time because you've
You might,
accomplished something.
yeah. But the deep abiding happiness that comes from, well, I guess it comes from being connected to your purpose and your place in life, what you're doing, that
Being able to experience the resonance of the moment. Og Mandino calls it the precious present.
right.
It truly
And
is. It is a precious present that's a gift to you by being able to be still enough not to let your own mishigas take over.
right, right. And the mind chatter, and I don't exactly know how you work with people, but one of the things I do is I just say, all that stuff is fine. Just use it to pause. Use it to bring you back to the present moment. So in this moment, you can make a different situation,
Yeah. And
different
there's no
choice.
prescriptive ways to be in the present moment. That's an
Right?
individual activity, right? Whatever works for you is great as long as it works. If it doesn't work, then maybe there's a micro adjustment that needs to be
Try
made.
something else. Try some. Do another experiment. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so the idea that we can. Oh, that's another one. It's so easy if you stay in the present to not worry about what happened in the past. But
What is it? Lao Tzu, I think it was Lao Tzu says, if you're worried, you're either in the future or the past. This is paraphrasing, because you're not in the present.
right, and it takes practice to to keep coming back here. It takes practice
It does.
because probably the things that we remember from the past or that we worry about for the future, they have emotional components. And again, really, I'm not sure. And the future a lot has expectations too, right?
Mhm.
That you had already mentioned that expectations set you up for a drop down.
Unless you have a conversation. And this is what we avoid like a plague, is to have that open, vulnerable conversation is of this is my intention. This is how I want to interact with you. And this is what my hopeful is from that interaction from you. And then the other person has a chance to respond. Otherwise, you make an assumption. We know what that does, right?
Not good.
And yeah, and I don't have any butt, so my ass has been long gone. And it is, however, imperative that you have that you hit the pause button whenever any of those kinds of things come up, and just have a moment of reflection, or even if it's just to take a breath and chill for a moment before you engage any further. Because if when we don't, we have a tendency to react to what is coming at us, because we feel like there's something coming at us, so we want to push back, right? Well, how does that work, right? You end up in this agitated, argumentative kind of energy. Whether you're actually having an argument or not is inconsequential, but you set up that energy to where it's in conflict. There really is no conflict. There's just misunderstanding. Why? Because you don't know the other person's unspoken, unfulfilled expectations, or the dictionary that they are actually speaking and listening from.
I love that. I when I was first married, I said to my husband, there's only so many words in the English language. And he had been married before. And I said, and I'm going to use some of the same ones that your ex wife used. But it doesn't mean that I mean the same thing that she meant when she used those words.
Exactly.
And he just looked at me like, are you crazy? And I'm like, I just need you to think about it.
No, I'm
You
not
know,
crazy. I'm just a little weird.
just a little weird, a little sideways. But it was my first this is my first articulation of the fact that even the same word, we might use the same word, you and I, and it might not have the same meaning for each of us. But because it's the same word, we think that it does.
Right. Now, how
And to
did
me,
you notice the difference when you said the word? and he let's say at first reacted instead of responding. How did you notice that? How was that display obvious that, oops, I hit a trigger?
I didn't even know the word trigger at that time.
Mhm.
It was not
Sure.
used in the world. But the reaction was so opposite of what I expected, what I
Or
hoped for.
intended.
And it was very clear to me that no matter what I had intended with what I had said, what went through was not what I intended.
Hmm.
And and to
And then the
and
conversation becomes defensive because he's misunderstood you. You know it. Now you're trying to defend yourself, and oh, that's not really what I meant. And
well, no, and then there is the assumption on the other person's part that you did this on purpose to be hurtful.
right.
Okay, that's my trigger, right? I mean, being misunderstood is the beginning of it, and then it's like a little dance of misunderstanding.
Hmm.
And and then the assumption that I would do something hurtful on purpose to the person I really care about.
Right.
I get so caught up in that
And that they
that
would even think you would
yes,
do so.
yeah, yeah. And so somehow on this one day, I didn't go there with the hurt.
Hmm.
He might have done something too and said, when so and so said, and I'm like, I'm not so and so. I said, but we only have certain number of words to use, you know, and I can't make up new words that she
Right.
never used.
Oh, I
I
do.
can't.
I don't.
That's good. That's good. So that was a beginning of an understanding, and where I took that was in how I talk to myself. And I and it took a number of years for me to
Mhm.
realize that I spoke to myself. I was very demanding, very exacting, expected perfection most of the time, wasn't very tolerant of mistakes to my own. I was pretty nice to other people. Well, I know you didn't
Okay.
mean that, so we'll fix it. Drop the glass.
Isn't it interesting how we often have such high expectations of ourselves? We often don't meet them. And so we become self-deprecating, and then that rolls out into, when we don't meet our expectations in communication, and then we beat up on ourselves even more. It's just like, oh, come on, really? And this is the conversation one needs to have with self, because it is kind of silly, and yet it's very emotionally impactful in the process that it's happening. And one of the things that I learned to uh, just kind of be careful of in my communications is I'm pretty direct, and sometimes when those words don't meet what I think they ought to in another, you'll see micro expressions. You'll see body language changes. You'll understand by looking and trying to understand the other person, their responses to you, that that missed the mark. That's a sin, right? Where you missed the mark in your communication. It wasn't because you didn't intend to miss the mark. It was that there wasn't an established trust relationship that had been built over time that allowed you to express yourself, and the other person not have any triggers and just being able to hear you. And that's especially in relationship, but I don't know of too many marriages that even last 40, 50, 60 years that have that kind of foundational communication agreements in them. I just got remarried after a 30-year window, and my wife is from St. Petersburg, Russia. So there are multiple things that could affect our communication and did for a while. We were both astute enough and mature enough that we recognized those things and worked them out over time, because we knew we began our relationship under a threefold premise, and that was faith, love, and trust. And so returning to that when things got awry really brought us back into center and realizing, okay, yeah, we got kind of off, and neither one of us intended to do so. And yet both of us were water signs. So we get emotional, right? And that's kind of the fun part of it, because now we can get emotional and not be attached because we understand it's just a conversation, and we can embody that feeling, that emotion, whatever it is, and not be projecting it. It's just our own feeling in the moment. And then it gives us the opportunity to self examine, work through it, and step up to a new type of, more resonant field, if you will. And I think that happens in any kind of relationship, whether it is a couple or a work group, or partners that you might have in owning a business, any of those kinds of things. That it's communication that's the key in everything, and any problem can be solved when you learn how to talk about it.
Right. Right. And sometimes both people need a space
Hmm?
and take a little time and then approach the conversation from a different angle,
Right.
different point of view. The other thing I think about myself and my personal journey as I went along was that idea that my emotions are mine, and nobody has to agree with them. Nobody has to participate in them. Nobody has to approve them or disapprove them. And I don't need to put them on anybody else. I don't need and when I started to figure this out, then they didn't spill over out of me in a way,
Right. Right.
and I was able to uh, let them kind of be and notice them and move through like water is always moving. Sometimes we get a strong emotion and we hang on to it, and we, like a sore tooth, we think things over and over and over to keep that emotion churning, when
Right.
in reality, even a whirlpool in a river is going to spin around a little bit, and then it's going to spit something out
Hmm.
and keep
I
moving.
think those are called eddies.
Eddies.
No
Right.
Sam's, just eddies.
Right. So it's very freeing to be able to um, to give yourself the grace to make mistakes, right? So when you fall down, you
Right.
get back up. This is not stubbing your toe and running a marathon. You said learning how to
Stubbing your
walk.
toe and going ouch, and then moving on.
Well, and the concept of learning how to walk means to me, in this situation, one might walk this way. In that situation, you might need different shoes to walk. And so
Absolutely.
you're learning in the process of doing.
Right. That you have choices. Right. That's the huge thing we don't we always have a choice of what we do. No matter what, we can say, oh, but you made me. But no, you didn't make me do anything. That was my choice to
Right.
do whatever it is I did. This is
Right.
what I love about the position that I've got now with Live and Let Live. We've got, like, there are two aspects of Live and Let Live. One's a legal, one's a moral. The legal side is don't be an aggressor, and we need to calibrate the law to remove aggression in all its facets, from government to individuals, right? That's huge. And people say, oh yeah, I get it. Well, yeah, but when you talk about, like, free trade, you legalize everything, all things that have even been illegal, in order to have a free trade and free society. So you have choices. Nobody can impose on you. Then the moral side of it is to be a better human, which is kind of the shirt that I have on today. um, as an example of that. And by being a better human, that means I have one of our founders says that you're an iron-fisted dictator of your body, property, life, and love, right? For instance, nobody can impose on that because that's aggression, right? Similarly, as long as you're not being aggressor, then you're free to do whatever it is you want. And my moral precepts or beliefs or conditions cannot affect you. I have no right to impose my moral standards on you. I can ask you to be better. I can offer opportunities for that to take place and invite you to maybe enjoy life a little better if you make this subtle adjustment. But I can't force you to. I can only invite, ask, request, and then I have to let it go. And if those things don't work out, then I can always say, okay, not working out. Love you. See you later.
Right,
Move on.
right. And this ability to allow somebody else, how about to allow them not only to stub their toe, but to fall completely down? Your gym teacher, we started with that story with the
Yeah.
with the blindfold. If he'd been running behind you and saying, no, no, don't go here, don't go there, don't go here, don't go there, you might not have learned that running in a blindfold was not a very good thing to do.
It's like running with scissors, right? No, I run
Right.
blindfolded. I don't care. And at that age, what was I, 13, 14, something like that. I did get the PE award that year, though.
Okay, fearlessness. Fearlessness is good in certain
Yeah,
situations.
sure.
And so, but I also think about training wheels on a bike, and if the parent doesn't let go of the bike, if they don't eventually take the training wheels off, the child never learns the responsibility, like you said, of their
Yeah.
choices.
And even sometimes they don't. The bicycle, that brings up another thing that happened to me. I was, oh, 6, 7, maybe it was I had a Schwinn Typhoon that I got from my birthday. And I was riding down a hill over towards my grandmother's house. We live in a small town. And there's a rock in the middle of the road. And I'm thinking, oh, cool. I'm going to jump over this rock, right?
Yeah.
So my front tire hit the rock and the bike stopped. And I did 2 somersaults on the bike in the air before I let go. And then my chin came down and hit a curb. Lucky I didn't break my neck. And I have a flat chin from that.
From that.
But it's like, oh gosh, I thought it would be really cool, but it wasn't so. Now, did it keep me from experimenting and doing, you know, things that you shouldn't be doing? No, I just did them with a little more caution
Caution.
in the future because I knew what might happen if I didn't. And as kids, you really don't think about those things. And I grew up with kids that were extremely timid, right? They were so afraid of anything that they wouldn't move at all. And here I am, I'm attempting everything. And why not? Right? What's the worst that could happen? Well, I'd probably
Smack
kill
my
myself.
chin and get some
Right. But,
stitches, right?
you never think about that kind of stuff and you never really do anything that, or at least fortunately, I suppose I could have, right? But when you do those things, I have this sense that, and it could be wrong, but it's a theory that I kind of live my life by. When you do things fearlessly and you trust in whatever all it is that it's going to work out, it does. It may not work exactly like you want it to. Nobody gets hurt, nobody dies, and you all go for a soda.
I had gone on a picnic once with a friend, and we had climbed a hill to watch the sunset. Okay, this is grand, but it was bright light when we went up the hill, and nobody thought to bring a flashlight.
Mm.
And when we were getting ready to walk down the hill, it was pretty much dusk, and I was dancing, and the person I was with knew my dance teacher, and they're like suddenly frightened. If you hurt yourself, I'm going to be in so much trouble. He's saying, you know, and I'm like, I got this, and I just took off running down the hill, and I knew in that instant that my feet would all land in the right place, and I would make it to the bottom of the hill just fine.
Mm-hmm.
He sat on his behind and slid down, but that was okay. That was his choice.
Right.
But he's like, "How could you do that?" And I said, like you said, trust. I
Right.
I knew inside me, I knew. Just do this, you'll be fine.
Now, here's another instance, perfect illustration as well. I was rock climber for a decade or so in my 30s and 40s. I didn't like the lead climb, but I loved climbing. So one day, a friend of mine talked me into lead climbing up a rock face. It was the first anchor was about 60 feet up, and the incline was such that you could almost walk up it if you were really careful. And so in getting up to that, uh, there was minimal challenge, though there was challenge, right? Couldn't stand straight up, had to hug the rock and go up and grab where I could to make sure that I wouldn't fall. But I get up to the anchor and I put the carabiner in it and I'm pulling the rope up between my legs to tie it into the other clip. And as I'm clipping in, I think, I hope I don't slip.
Oh,
Guess what happened?
slip.
On the S, my right foot let go, and I'm going down the face of this rock, and my climbing shoes sound like a card in a bicycle tire.
Oh my gosh.
With a, all the way down, and I'm looking at the ground coming up, hugging the rock on the way down. Of course, my fingers are taped, so I wouldn't get my skin ripped off. But I'm watching the ground come up, and I'm watching my buddy just kind of, wondering how he's going to catch me. And I get about 10 foot off the ground. I push off, I spin around, and I hit the ground. And of course, I hit him in the neck with my elbow on the way and knock him on his butt. And I hit the ground and I tumbled. Nobody got hurt, fortunately. The example, though, was your my thinking. If I hadn't have thought, I hope I don't slip,
Slip.
right? The mind doesn't hear, I hope I don't. It hears the subject, which is slip, right? I slip. And so I did. Now, think about that, and maybe your audience also. Think about that in how you approach doing anything and how you talk yourself out of instead of talking yourself into, and see what kind of switch you can make in your own thinking to acknowledge that you've accomplished something as opposed to slipped.
Yeah. No, it's important that I first learned that contraction piece working with animals because they don't, you know, if you say don't go in the street, they're like in the street.
Oh, yeah.
And if you say stay out of the street, they stay
They
out of
still
the
go in the
street.
street. Oh,
No, they don't. You just stay out, They got
okay.
it out. Okay. And so it took me a good 10 or 15 years to start looking at my own thinking that way too. And to say, well, wait, little kids don't understand contractions. Animals don't understand contractions. I wonder if I really understand contractions, you know. And I think you're right. I think the inner part, no, doesn't. We use them all the time in language that's a surface level. That's not that real level of creating and doing and being.
Yeah, what would have happened if I thought, I hope I can clip in instead of, I hope I don't slip?
Right.
right? Same activity, different thinking about it.
Yep. Yep. And it's important to practice this, I think, on things that aren't that important.
Hmm.
So that in an important situation, you can catch that, I hope I don't.
Right.
And
Right.
you say, I
And
hope this works out really well, you know.
now, do
And
you ever change your habits arbitrarily? You know, like I have certain habits in the kitchen in the morning, and sometimes I will purposely change it just because I can, first of all, but it also makes me more aware of what I'm doing. I'm not in some kind of unconscious behavior or
like in a
pattern.
trance, yeah, like making coffee in the morning.
Right. How often, you get in the car after work and next thing you know, you're home. Well, how did I get there?
Right, right. Who
Instead
who
of,
drove who drove home?
yeah, exactly.
But a, a lot what I do is I notice the energy with which I'm doing something. And if as soon as like scrambling eggs, right? And suddenly I become aware that I'm squeezing my fork. And that's like a moment for me. And I'm like, yeah, squeezing the fork is going to make the egg scramble better.
Right.
Not, you know. And then I see I'm working too hard. I'm doing too much in the moment when really the eggs are pretty soft, the fork is pretty pokey,
Mhm.
and then I interrupt the habit. Most of my habits involve too much effort in an intent.
Chinese, the Chinese have a saying that give 70% effort, right,
Hard
towards
for
everything that
Americans,
you do.
isn't it?
So you've got something in reserve if you need it, and
Which
you
is
do
important.
pretty much what's necessary to get the job done without overexerting yourself. So why would this is part of that reciprocation from life. If you're given 100%, what can life give back to
Yeah.
you? Right? Because it's usually that 30% that it gives back that makes you go, woohoo, yes!
That's, I think that is a beautiful idea for us to use to come to a conclusion, unless you have another thing that's really important that you would like to share.
Mm.
But I love that, allowing space, that 30% space for life to contribute to the energy of what you're doing, to the outcome of the project that you're working on. That's a lot of that creative spark, that kind of thing that comes together when you work with people.
And you give that creativity a chance to become present from outside of you as well, because that's the reciprocal. That's making the without as the within.
It's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your journey with us, for inspiring some courage and curiosity about how we do things in everyday life.
And I invite courage and curiosity in your audience visiting liveandletlive.org and looking at what we're in process of and even joining us in that participation.
I will make sure it's in the comments so everybody can find the link. And I've been to your website, which is flowing across the bottom, and I know it's accessible
Rabbit
from the
hole full.
website. What?
It's rabbit hole full.
I know, but rabbit holes, they're very fun.
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of burrows and communities and things you never knew until you dive in.
Right. So you explore and experiment and see what
Yeah,
happens. So thank you so much.
you're welcome so
And
much. Thanks for having me.
it's been a joy.